Hey everyone, happy Friday. I am Andriana Rice-Gilmore. Some of you may know me as Anna. Either or is totally fine with me. This week I'm going to be talking about Permit Patty, who is a white woman who called the police on an 8-year-old girl who was black for selling water bottles on their neighborhood street. And I think that it was, a bit uncalled for because, mind you, this is a child and things like that just shouldn't happen to children. Um, First, I want to give you a little bit of background. So, Allison Edel, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, also known as Permit Patty, on social media, spent the day calling the police on Jordan Rogers, who is 8 years old, as stated before, because she was being too loud on a hot day without a permit. And Rogers, was selling the water bottles as a way to help her single parent mom. I think a lot of times kids kind of feel responsible for helping their parents, especially when they see that they're a single parent. Even though she's 8 years old, a lot of times they know right off the bat, how it goes. So, of course, she's out here trying to help her mom, but also it has come to light that she was trying to raise money to go to Disneyland. And like every, 8-year-old kid or every kid in general, even myself, a lot of times they want to go to Disneyland because, they want to see Mickey and, all those characters that they grow up with. And again, like every kid, she wants to go to Disneyland, so she used water bottles on a hot day, something that's very necessary as a means to achieve that goal. But because, Allison or Permit Patty didn't like that, she called the cops. And there's a video circling around social media that shows her calling the cops. And of course, people reacted based off of that because, everyone's kind of feeling the same way. Why would you call the cops on a kid who's providing for the greater good, serving those water bottles to people that's out on the streets and are probably hot from the hot day, and just doing, better for something better for her as well. And based off of that, I think that Permit Patty's actions were unnecessary. Again, this is a kid, like I said before, and she, claimed to have been polite but stern. And many times, on a parent's view, I'm not a parent, but I would just guess, when a parent comes to another parent, for one, and says, hey, in a kind way, in a polite way, I'm trying to work, it's hot, I got the windows open, your daughter's screaming, could you just keep it down? That's probably how I would have presented it, but I'm guessing that's probably not how it came across. Maybe that was her intention, but from what it seems like, that's not how it came across. And I think, as maybe another parent, they would have probably received that a little better and be like, oh, you know what, let me move my child, we'll come back later, when it's not so busy. I think that's how that probably would have went down. But because, that part of the sternness, polite but stern, that's where she messed up. And I think that, sternness and harshness, maybe rudeness as well, kind of translated into her asserting her power over a child. That's where the big issue, comes to, that power over a child. Sometimes children feel like hopeless when there's an adult that's yelling at you. I mean, what else could you do as a child? I don't even like when my own mother yells at me. I mean, who does? Like, it's scary, let alone your neighbor who doesn't look like you. Like, that's terrifying. And I think that she did this knowing that it would scare the child and knowing that it would get out her pleasure, whatever she really needed, and that was, to get the child off the street without the permit. But we'll get back to that whole permit thing later. Which leads me to my next point. She mentioned that people have their windows open. That was including other people into this, bigger issue. And it didn't seem to be a bother to the other neighbors because there probably would have been more people to talk about it or bring it to the kids' awareness, but it seemed as though she's the only one that truly had an issue. I think by, bringing in the other people and saying people was a way to kind of push her narrative and push that her viewpoint was right and that it was just and that it was fair, when in reality she just used it to gain her pleasure, to gain her, move her idea forward, and that it was the most important idea, that you're being too loud and everyone's being bothered, not even knowing if anyone else was bothered by it. So I think that was another way to kind of like, stroke her ego and like kind of get her way. You know, this was not the case at all. In fact, it seemed like, again, that she was the only one that had an issue with it. And like I said, people probably would have stepped up and said something and would have banned with her and probably brought it to the mother's attention, maybe in a different way, probably in a better way. It would have been received differently. But again, that wasn't the case. And I think that was also an issue, having to include other people to back your story. It already seems like it's wrong off the bat. So in addition to that, when it comes to power, like I said earlier, she asserted her power over a child, but it's hard to ignore the obvious fact. There's something going on with race. Even in the article, it's stated, white woman calls the police on black girl. You can't really ignore that. It's right there in writing, and it's natural. Throughout history, that's what we see, that's what we look at immediately. So I think that maybe she called the police because throughout history it has been found that white women use the police department as a weapon to use against people of color. And I think that she did this because she knew that the child would be vulnerable to it. She knew that the kid wouldn't have any other way to, do anything but to get off the street and stop selling water bottles illegally. She's a criminal. But I mean, you have to look back into history. Like I said, I mean, even I, growing up, was kind of always taught to be, eyes open when it came to the police department. And I think it's a lot of time, even as kids, even in an 8-year-old, it's kind of threaded into your DNA. It's something that you can't ignore. So being that fact, a lot of people know that. I mean, obviously, doesn't matter if you're black or white. It's obvious that when someone calls the cops on someone black, that the outcome for someone black it won't even be great. I mean, I'm not saying that's all the time, but usually that's just how it happens, and that's the sad truth. In addition to that, so yeah, I think that she used her power of race over a child, and I think those two things go hand in hand because she knew that power would work. And that's a great issue as well. That's just something that, we are still working towards, perfecting, but it is what it is. It's still a hole in the wall that needs to be patched. So therefore, like I said, before I even wrap it up, I do want to, go back into the idea of it being a permit. I think that it wasn't really about the permit. The permit was really just, it's more based on how she viewed the child. She's treating this child as a criminal. She called the cops on them. She's being stern, like if there's really an issue. And mind you, this is an 8-year-old girl who's literally just trying to go to Disney. Like, what kind of criminal action could you really, But by saying, oh, you don't have a permit, then it's like everyone, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But at the same time, again, like, this is a kid. Like, I get her point. Yeah, it was a hot day. People are working. I totally get that. But calling the cops and treating a kid like a criminal, it seems unnecessary to me. So yeah, just to wrap it up, just go back. She was obviously wrong. She's in the wrong. And because of that, and because of the video circulating, she's, going through it now. She's suffering the consequences. That's just how it goes. And, that's just what happens. You have to reap what you sow sometimes. Do I think that she deserves death threats or anything like that? Of course not. I mean, who does? It's obviously very sickening. But again, this is social media, so people, Twitter fingers, they'll say what they want and how they feel, no matter how it comes across. And I think that's something that she'll be mindful of next time, how she delivers. Again, not saying that the way she's receiving is right, but I think her delivery will be different next time because she decided that, going for her greater pleasure was going to be best instead of maybe just, backpedaling, going into a different room and ignoring the kid completely for the greater good of everyone. But it is what it is. Hope you all, learned a little bit about Permit Patty. If you didn't cover this topic that was suggested, now you know. So happy Friday, enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you guys next week.